Hey, this is Kip, and in this video, we're going to learn how to use the OBS mode in the G1000 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, this is a feature that got added in the latest update, Sim Update 3, and I'm going to show you how OBS mode makes it really easy to line up with the runway during your approach. So I'm here at White Sulphur Springs Airport in Montana. This is a grass strip we're going to take off from, and we're going to head west about 45 miles to Helena Regional Airport in Montana. Alright, so we're making our climb here, and we're only 48 miles from our destination airport. So what I'm going to do is figure out which runway we're going to land at. So I'm going to do that by opening my air traffic control window and going to the airport list. So I'm going to keep clicking airports farther from you until we get Helena on the list. Here it is right here, Helena Regional. So I'm going to click here. And then I'm going to try to tune into the ATIS. And this is a message that repeats over and over again, that's updated every hour, and it gives us the weather information, and it also gives us the active runways at the airport. So we'll listen in for which runways are in use for landing. Alright, runway 27. Okay, so runway 27 is in use according to the ATIS. Now, we never know for sure that's going to be the runway we land at. The tower controller could assign us any runway. If there's weather that comes in at the last minute, or there's a lot of traffic sequenced in on another runway, they could give you any runway. But we're going to go with the ATIS for now and set up for runway 27. Now, we're just using a direct-to flight plan here. We're not using any approaches or anything fancy like that. And generally, we would fly towards the airport, talk to the controller, and they'd tell us something like, make left traffic for runway 27. So we need to get within the traffic pattern altitude, which is generally 1,000 feet above the elevation of the airport, make our standard traffic pattern of a couple left turns to get on final, and then we would land. But what's really nice is if you can come in on a straight-in approach, and we can just do that by coming in at the same direction that the runway heading is. So we're already lined up for a straight-in approach. And this is one use for the OBS where you can figure out exactly what course you need to fly to line up with the runway. So let's go ahead and do that. So we know that the runway number is 27. So if you add a 0 on the end of the runway number, that gives you the general heading of that runway. I actually looked up the airport diagram for this airport, and it does match exactly at 270 for the runway heading. Sometimes it's off by a degree or two, and you only know that if you look up the actual airport diagram. So this heading of the runway 27 is the heading 270. So we want to approach the airport on a course of 270. Right now, you can see our course that was figured out by the GPS is 280. So we're going to be off from the runway heading. So to correct for that, we can just use OBS mode. And what OBS mode does is let you basically override the course you're heading for your next waypoint. So I'm going to click on OBS, and you can see that this line right here just extended all the way out to the edges of the map. And you can think of it as it's fixed to your next waypoint. So the center of this line is right here where the colors change from magenta to white. That's our active waypoint right here, KHLN. And what we can do is change the course by turning this course knob right here. It's this one that's shaped like a triangle. And when we turn this, watch what happens to the line here. And now our autopilot is active. I'm going to leave it active because we're not making a huge change. It's only about 10 degrees. I'm just going to let it keep turning automatically. So I'm going to change the 280 to a 270 by turning this triangular dial here. And you can see that now the course moved up and it's north of us. We're not on the course anymore, but the autopilot is taking us to that because I left the autopilot engaged. So this magenta line now is basically a huge extended runway line for that runway 27 that we're landing at. So we just fly to the magenta line, and therefore we'll be lined up already with an approach for straight in on runway 27. Now, some other uses you might realize are possible now with the OBS is not only for runways, but you can also use it to navigate inbound and outbound to a VOR using your GPS instead of using your Navigation 1 radio and actually tuning into the VOR frequency. So there is actually a VOR here at the airport. You can see that little VOR symbol. So I could set that VOR, or say this VOR down here in the bottom left, as my next waypoint. And when I'm flying to that VOR, I can use the OBS knob to dial in the radial that I'm going to fly in. And then when we cross over the VOR, I can then change the course again to choose my outbound radial. And if you want to learn more about VOR navigation, you can check out my video linked below. But for now, we're going to use the OBS just to use it to line up with the runway. Now, we're going to do a straight-in approach here, but you could do this for any approach just as a nice visual reference for what course you need to be on to get to the runway. All right, so we are 35 miles away still, so I'm going to take this flight a little longer, and we're going to contact the tower when we're within about 10 miles or so. So just a reminder, when you're using OBS mode, it basically suspends the automatic sequencing that the GPS does. So that means the GPS will go from one point, and when it gets there, it'll automatically sequence you to the next waypoint and start turning towards it if you have autopilot on. So by using OBS mode, you're essentially locking that to the next waypoint only. So once you get to that waypoint, if you're not, landing there like we are, when you turn OBS off, it'll automatically change you to the next waypoint in the list after the one you had locked it to with OBS. All right, as you can see, I got a little close to some precipitation, and we're all iced up now, so our airspeed is really suffering. Luckily, we're close enough to the airport, so we're going to go here and choose Helena now, and we're going to ask them for permission to land. So request full stop landing, and hopefully they'll give us runway 27.
Kilo India Papa is 14 miles east with Kilo to land.
Cessna November 21 Kilo India Papa Helena Tower. Make straight in runway 27.
All right, straight in runway 27. All right, so let's acknowledge their pattern entry, which is a straight-in entry.
Runway 27 Cessna Kilo India Papa.
And this is what they'll give us when they see that we're already lined up for the runway. It's just a straight-in approach, so we don't need to make any traffic turns there. And you can see how well lined up with the runway we already are. We're not using an ILS or anything like that. We're just using the OBS mode to line us up with that course. All right, we're cleared to land. Hit 1 to reply to them.
Cleared to land runway 27 Cessna Kilo India Papa.
All right, we got our flaps down. I'm going to disconnect the autopilot. Okay, bringing it down to idle. All right, a little to the left, but it was pretty smooth. Not unhappy about that one. All right, so we've landed here safely at Helena Airport in Montana. Hope you guys found this video useful in seeing what the OBS mode can do for you and lining up a straight-in approach, or using it as just a runway reference in general. Please leave any comments, suggestions, and questions below, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.